No, it is bright. Let me know when we're ready. We're ready? Okay. Sound okay? I don't have my glasses. Yep, it's on. Okay. Check everything. Wow, so quiet. This is the quietest I've ever witnessed in this room with the fullest audience. It's almost magical. So, good evening, everyone. A warm welcome to all of you. In case there's anyone whom I have not met, my name is Juan. I am the Dean of the John H. Daniels Faculty of Architecture, Landscape, and Design. A big welcome to all of you. We are also joined by a large audience who is participating in this lecture online. So a big welcome for those of you who cannot make it in person tonight. Before we begin tonight's event, I would like to acknowledge the land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. And we are very grateful to have the opportunity to work and learn on this land. The name of the avenue that we're on, Spadina, comes from the Anishinaabe phrase meaning a place on a hill. And this site is also an important trail of the meeting place and traveling of many historic meeting places that was enjoyed by several First Nations communities. We note this history with respect, and we wish to honor these connections as we move towards truth and reconciliation collectively. Tonight, on the eve of the International Women's Day, I'm so honored to introduce our esteemed guest, Dr. Phyllis Lambert. Phyllis was trained as an architect and is also an author, a photographer, a critic, and a conservation activist. She was director of planning for the Seagram building from 1954 to 1958, and she has founded the Canadian Centre for Architecture in 1979. Today, the CCA serves as one of the most internationally important institutions for architecture and design. Throughout her expansive career, Phyllis has received many international accolades, including Golden Lion at the 2014 Venice Biennale, and most recently, the 2023 Ada Louise Huxtable Prize for contribution to architecture. It is an underestimate to say that her accomplishments are inspiring and expansive and continuing. As is demonstrated tonight, she continues to work very hard every day in her life for new and ongoing projects, and I can't wait to see what she'll be working on and sharing with us next. But tonight, she will be sharing with us her latest project, which is a book entitled Observation is a Constant That Underlies All Approaches. Published by Lars Mueller, the book is a collection of photographs taken over several decades during her work and life, revealing a lifelong quest to understand and reveal what might otherwise remain overlooked and hidden. And now I'm very, very honored to present to you Madame Lambert.
Hi, that's better. I'm delighted to be here and to see lots of good friends in the front and not so many people I know afterwards, but welcome to the students and welcome to my friends. how I got started on this project is that I'm an Instagram junkie. And I want to thank all those people, very kind people, who said to me, well, why don't you do a book? And it was sort of a daunting idea. And I was doing another book I'd been working on for some time, and still I'm working on. And so I asked a very talented young multimedia artist, David Siren, and David is right here in the front row. Where are you, David? There he is, great. And he finally became a curator of the book. He went through, yesterday I said 3,000, he said no, it's 80,000 photographs, images. And he claims that. Originally, we planned 200. We didn't have any publisher in mind. But then I wrote to Lars Müller, one of the greatest publishers I know, is just wonderful. And he said, no, we have to have 300 photographs. So you see some of them lying on the towel. Oh, this is just a tiny bit of those 300 photographs, which compose the book. And Lars taught us how to pair, to put two images together. But the wonderful thing about the book, can't just demonstrate it because I didn't bring one with me, but it's a more small thing. It's kind of nice and fat, and it lies open, flat. This is very unusual. You have a book and you have 2 pages. You have to sort of push it to hold it down, but this is you can just leave it open, and it's wonderful. And the quality, of course, the graphics. And also the quality of the printing. The paper, first of all, the paper is so beautiful. It's not shiny paper, and it's just so wonderful to the touch. And then the other thing about is that the blacks are very sort of sparkly. I compared it. I looked at our book that I did with Richard Pear on photography and architecture, which was actually the first time that subject had been established, and we thought it was wonderful. It was great printers in the east coast of the United States. But the blacks are sort of dead there. But this is, the quality of this, it's just extraordinary. So I might have done the photographs, which I did, but I think that, if I had not the help of David, and the help, then it wasn't just help, it was his curating the thing, fantastic time he took in going through the images, choosing them. We discussed, of course, what we're going to do, but, between the, I'm thinking of T.S. Eliot, but I won't say it. But then we were also, I guess, having to look after the curatorial issues, finding some of the places we did, and also just cleaning the slides. It was just an amazing job he did. And then, of course, there was this fantastic Lars Müller who made this wonderful, beautiful product. I love the book. I just find it so pleasant. I'm also grateful to many people at the CCA, and especially the man who's been since 2004, my archivist at the CCA. And, again, without the exception, without somebody who's kept the material, who's catalogued it and this kind of thing, so these are things that are so special to doing this. I don't have a piece of some water here. Just a second. I'm going to, let's see, I have to take. There, I've got the water, it's okay. There. Sometimes my voice gets a bit growly, sorry about that. Observation. Well, as a child I was a sculptor. Actually, when I was about 12, 14, I exhibited at the Art Gallery of Ontario as a juried show. I remember that very well. I was sort of a kid, but it was wonderful. But my teacher was tremendous because he taught me, he sharpened my eye by asking me to go out of the room and to come back and criticize, pretend that I was Mrs. Jones, or Mrs. Whatever, and to come back and criticize what Phyllis had done, the bee sting, or how the work worked. And that was an invaluable sort of way of learning to be self-critical. And I think it's marvelous to be able to do that. Observation is a very complex question. I think that we'll discuss that later with Brian Boigon a little bit. But my first use of the camera was really in about 1953, 54, when the Seagram building was being thought of. And the question was, how did you think about it? I was spending time with a friend of mine who was an art historian in Rome. And so I used a camera. I just had it. I hadn't used it much. To observe, to see how a building sits on the land, how it relates to the land around it, the other buildings, and also, of course, all of the articulation of the facade and how that works with the inside. And then the question was, yes, when I started to work on the Seagram building, I was kind of fascinated. I was in the office with Mies van der Rohe and Philip Johnson. We had our offices together. And so I was watching the whole process of how the design of the building. And I was very curious about how buildings were designed, what were the kind of drawings were made. I was more interested in working drawings than I was in the very beautiful renderings. And some places didn't have renderings. In England, yes, in the 17th and 18th century, 19th century, but not in France because it was the king, so he decided. And so the issue, I began then to collect books on architecture and also photographs, and I really fell in love with the process. I loved the quality of. We started collecting photographs, and most of the photographs we collected first, I'll tell you who we is in a minute, are the in the beginning, in the 1840s, 50s, and 60s, and it was simply very exciting to watch this. The question comes about how that relates to the work I did. How it relates to the photographs we chose, and I think that related to my trained eye because of my sculpture, and because, of course, having worked I hadn't worked as an architect yet, because I went to Yale after I finished the Seagram building, and then on to Chicago, where I did my master's at the Illinois Institute of Technology. And it was there in a class for on art history, in urban history, was a city development. It was called city history of cities, and so I was kind of fascinated by the possibilities of how the theory, and one had some sense of that, but how is it on the ground? How does the sense of a city develop? How does it grow? And it sort of seems very simple when you say that, and so I went up to Montreal, where I had lived. I was born and went to before I went to college. I lived there, and I went with Richard Pear, who was a young photographer, who was he was an Englishman who was quite young. He was He was at the Art Institute of Chicago doing his master's in photography. And so he used a large format camera. I had tried that, but very complex. And so also I had to scout, because I didn't know Montreal very well. we lived kind of like in a sort of, wasn't a gated community, but you could say it was just about that. And we didn't go anywhere. We sort of walked to school, but that was possible. So I really didn't know the city at all. But I always loved the Greystone buildings, which I did pass some of them on my way to school. And so I thought, well, that would be quite very interesting. If you follow the Greystone buildings, through decades, and you see, you have some basis, some database that you can work with. Because how are you going to decide what you're going to, how you're going to look at these things? So we did that, and then afterwards we did our first actually photographic mission in doing this Greystone study of photographs. I guess we did it in the winter of '72. I wanted to do it when it snowed, because these Greystone buildings, it's so effective. They protect against the cold, and it just seemed the right way to do it. So I guess we finished in this, just in the winter, in the winter of '74, and then I started, of course, doing research, because one wants to know a lot, and that leads. Well, I'll talk about that maybe later. But the photographs, yes, and we did quite a lot of missions actually together. We did for the centennial, not the centennial, the biennial of the United States. I sort of thought, a friend of mine had said how wonderful the courthouses were in the United States. And I thought, well, that's fascinating, because, if you want to do, by typologies. So if you want to do city halls or something like that, thousands and thousands and thousands, millions of them. But, the courthouse is a very local thing. It's not like a government courthouse. It's a local county courthouse. And so we did, it was a great thing. We commissioned about 24 photographers, and Richard was the editor of that. And then after that, I guess Richard did some work. I was doing work on the Ben Ezra Synagogue in the fortifications of the old city of Cairo, and so I asked Richard to photograph. So there was a great deal of sort of always using photography to try to understand the city, and Richard and I worked a great deal, and then he started forming the collection at the city, well, I didn't know what the institution was, but I just know that they were so wonderful and so important in getting a sense of time, of space, of history, and so I guess that's that part of what I want to say. And then, the photographs in this book, I'm not trying to photograph buildings and say, oh, this is building. Well, I know it here. Oh, the next one is fantastic. See, look at that. It's the Cologne Cathedral. It just looks like one big, huge stone compared with the in Turkey in the tombs cut into the rock. So first of all, I started working with black and white, and then because that was in the 60s, I guess. The earliest photograph of the book is 59, and which is I was taking a course at Yale in photography and graphics, and so it was a photograph that I did with a large format camera and developed and all that. But so I did black and white, and mostly with a close-up lens, 100mm lens, because I found that so fascinating. Then I turned to slides because I wanted to be able to talk about buildings or places that had been, not so much buildings, but the environment in which the building exists. And so I started using colored slides, and much of that was on vacation in over the summers in Greece, in the Aegean and the other Turkey and all the coasts of Greece. And at that time, I was designing the Sadie Bronfman Center in Montreal, and I was also designing the theater. So these great theaters, ancient theaters of Didyma, of Ephesus, of Delphi. And so it was a kind of a study for me, but it was such a great pleasure to be able to look at them, to study them, to think about them. And then I started doing three-screen projections, and that was before there was any idea about using digitization or such. So you have to coordinate all the projectors, and you have to. And I did this to music, so I pushed the buttons. So the places I did these shows were in somewhere along the line. You're going to see 3 screens of a theater in Pula in Croatia, and there are quite other ones in the book too. And so the 3 screens, I actually took the photograph like that, just to make sure to consciously create the 3-screen structure. And I had also did, for example, slideshows of burial places, cemeteries. Very interesting. If you want to go to a new city and want to learn something about it, or you want to live there, go see the cemetery first. You get a very good idea of what the character of the place is. And then I did extended this to Antigua, Guatemala, where the volcanoes stage the city, and then there are these wonderful villages way off, a place called Chichicastenango, which was really, at that time, this must have been in the 70s. There were isolated places. There were not tourist traps. And also, I did so in the Aros Mountains in Algeria of a Timugadi. These are all in the books. The photograph there that's a terrace of my house in Montreal, cleaning the snow off. Rarely did I photograph as such. Rather, my interest was in the process of telling details and the edges around a project that I'm involved in. In my mind's eye, I remember going up when the Seagram building was in construction. I was there very, very often on the site, and going up the shafts with the construction people, and going to the open floor. The building 3 bays by 5 bays, each bay being about 28 feet, something like that. And so that you had this rim of the glass going around it, this wonderful dark field of the columns, and the concrete the columns were steel, of course, but they were covered already by the stuff you use to fireproof them. So, but I can't find that photograph. I think there are others, but it was something that's always been so strongly in my mind, the excitement of these spaces. And then when the Seagram building was finished, I started photographing, people on the plaza. So you'll see some of those images too. And actually, I do want to read this because the surrounding, when the Seagram building was complete, the surrounding buildings and those that replaced them appear as I photograph the activity of people on the Seagram Plaza, that superlative urban public space, which met my dreams then of the social aspects of the city. And that is very, very important. When they talk of the Seagram building, talk of bronze or whatever it is, but it is that public space that really was created in New York and had not existed before, except for, of course, Rockefeller Center. Among the most treasured images, and there's some in this book of Justinian's Hagia Sophia in Constantinople. I think it's called Istanbul, and I know it is called Istanbul. But the way the half domes keep on buttressing the half domes, and so inside the building unfolds in this extraordinary kind of way. These are the sort of images that I keep on carrying in my head, and of course the wonderful stone veneers and the narthex and the gilded mosaics. I mean, it's just absolutely magnificent. And then, okay, so I did say that I photographed on vacations, but I guess most of the photographs I took were because of being an architect and the work I was doing and the organizations I was working with. So there's a Society of Architectural Historians, and I went to between Moscow and St. Petersburg. It was a marvelous trip to visiting the monasteries between them and the towns there. And there were, the Confederation of Architectural Museums, which was formed in 1979, was when the CCA was also formed, and it was just the first time this people who were creating architectural museums came together, and we had triennial conferences, and so the first one was in Scandinavia, I'll leave that alone, starting with Finland, and followed by Poland, Russia, Germany, Slovenia, Holland, England, France, and Spain, and then the Society of Architects. I told you about that. Oh yes, I went also with the Society of Architectural Historians with Barry Bergdahl and Dietrich Neumann to study the Mies van der Rohe's early buildings. At the time, I was doing the book Mies in America, and of course there I also had commissioned photographs for that book. I didn't make them myself because I was doing small format camera photographs. I wasn't doing carefully framed things. You frame, but it's an instant. It's not, and if you don't like it, you just go on to it, you try it again. So that, oh yes, and in some of the photographs, there was a wonderful project that was organized by Cynthia Davidson and Peter Eisenman called the Any Program. And it was the last decades of the 20th century. And so we went to Turkey, to 10 cities. We went to Los Angeles, to Yufuin, and to Tokyo, of course, in Japan, in Barcelona, Rotterdam, Istanbul, and Ankara, as well as Los Angeles, Montreal. Oh, I did say Los Angeles, Montreal, Paris, and New York. Okay, I'm just about at the end of telling you the trajectory here. The images in this volume also recount something about the maturation of a point of view. Richard Pear has expressed such depth with regard to his own work, and I quote, "The photographer stands before the structure and sees in the stones the rise and fall of oceans, the rise and fall of empires and fiefdoms, and enters the long centuries where the Roman stones stood abandoned and mute. So observation grows with what it feeds on, driven by focused inquiries that deepen exponentially over time." Thank you. I have to take this with me.
There was that final image of Hagia Sophia. Wait. It's okay. You guys will have to see it in the book. I think we have some books that will be around a bit later.
I wish I could be in the audience. These are so
I know,
huge.
me
It's
too.
fantastic.
Look at this. Thank you. Thank you so much, Phyllis. Thank you for sharing with us. We have more segments to be able to share with you tonight. And first, I would like to invite Professors Brian Boigon and Peter Sealy to join us on the stage. And we will also be inviting Brigitte Shim, who will be joining us online from Australia, I believe. So we're moving into this next segment, which will be an interactive sequence of 3 questions by 3 Daniels faculty members related to 3 images they have chosen in the book. And also just going ahead, following this, we will also be taking questions from the audience. So I hope the students in the audience, both at the Daniels faculty and also lifelong students, you can get your questions, start preparing them. So we'll be calling out on you, and we will try to take as many questions as possible following this next part. So thank you. Okay, great. No,
Okay, thank you.
I think actually, it's fine. Someone's controlling the lighting. I don't have to control it. So go ahead, Peter.
Thank you very much, Phyllis, for that wonderful presentation. Can I just ask for the slideshow about Phyllis's cameras, please?
You okay?
Because Phyllis, the question that I want to ask you, and I think you talked about it a bit already, but it's to go through some of the cameras that you've used and what kind of photographs you made with them. And we're just going to wait one moment and we'll get the image. So you mentioned in, but it's a beautiful photograph, a wonderful one to begin. And you mentioned that you began photographing in 1954 in Rome. Got a beautiful one of the sky here. Yeah. Sorry. Sorry, I think they're just getting it for us right now. These are amazing photographs. Wow.
So great
It's
to
a
see them
review
so
of the
large.
photographs. Yeah, so I think this was actually Brian's slideshow from earlier. I think it's in another document that we have the photographs that we picked for this part. And we'll know we have it because we're going to see this in just a couple of seconds. We're going to see this amazing photograph, and it's going to be an example. There it is, of some of the self-portraits that you've taken.
Go.
Thank you very much.
Good to go.
Of some of the photographs, of some of the pictures that you've taken of yourself with your cameras. So I wanted to ask you about the kind of cameras that you've used and what was your thinking behind different choices?
Well, the first kind that I used was an Nikon, a single lens reflex camera. And I also had, you could change the lenses, so you could have a 50 millimeter, the ordinary one, and the 100 millimeter, and the longer ones, 200 meter, and then the 35 millimeter, of course, with a rising front, which was quite helpful in overcoming, the convergence of
the perspective. And I think here we see an example of one of the Greystones photographs that when you were scouting to think of where you would go.
Well, this is a big project that I'm working on that I photographed with Richard Pear, as I said, from 72 to 74 in the winter. And it's a case study of how, in photographing a city, of how the city grows. Why is that building there? Mm-hmm. Who is responsible for the building being there? The proprietor or the institution, the people who used it, the functions, and just with that kind of education, Montreal has fantastic records because the French established that keeping archives of the things so that one can find out, very much about the structure of society from that way. And then when you start going behind it, the tremendous fascination of the interconnections. For example, the Sulpicians and then went, but the first building that's photographed is from 1685. There's another photograph of Montreal here, which shows the towers.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes, and so that then this is a long sort of period where nothing much happened until the English come in 1760, and so from there on you have this complication of cultures, which is enormously interesting, and also even within the different English, Anglo religious groups and cultures, and the French, the diocese, the archdiocese from Quebec City, and of course the Sulpicians in Montreal. These conflicts and the resolution of them is really enormously interesting.
Yeah, and this is it's an incredible project. Greystones was exhibited at the Canadian Centre for Architecture, I think about 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, it was more than that, but 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah.
Time has started to take on that,
and we
quality.
had that problem, yes.
And I think, I think everyone is very excited for this next book project. If I move along, this I believe was from the mid-'60s in Santa Monica, California.
Yeah, well, this was. Yes, he's wonderful. This was in Los Angeles in parking lots, and it's when these great fins were on cars. And then I did this also of the desert. We mounted them as a collage, as you can sort of see.
Yeah, thank you. Juan and I were both talking earlier that you're not far off from either the time that Rainer Banham was studying car culture in Los Angeles, or Denise Scott Brown and Robert Venturi in Las Vegas. But I think this is quite unique in your way of looking, almost with I wonder if it's even a telephoto lens to look at these,
yes,
these
that's what
details.
Telephoto lens, yes, definitely.
Oh, just fantastic. Probably the most unique kind of camera that we see in a book, if we go to the next, are this fascinating series of underwater photographs. And you, I think, even labeled this as a self-portrait.
Yes, it is. It's by shadow. It's very hard to see, but it's actually in the slide, it's easier to see, but in the book it's less. But you sort of see a sort of shape that's a reflection of myself.
Oh, so fantastic. And earlier, you mentioned during your talk some of these views that you made of
Yes,
slides. And
right.
I think this is the one you were referring to.
Yes, this is a Pula in Croatia.
Yeah, just fantastic. And so by now you had switched, or at least were taking many photographs with color.
I beg pardon?
I'm sorry. You were now taking many photographs with color slide film.
Yes, I was. Yes, and then I also started using negative color also, and then the cameras I used were. When I was changing from black and white to color, I had 2 cameras, one black and white, one color, and I'd take some things with one and some things with the other, and I was carrying both of those, and I also recorded the sounds for, and we were doing the Guatemala thing or whatever it was. So it was a bit of a, but then I got to the point where I thought, oof, all this equipment, and and you have to be so, you can't just casually photograph, you have to decide what you're going to be doing, which is fine, except that it was just too heavy and too much. So I started with a point and shoot camera, just a single lens, because I thought I'd never be able to have just a single lens, but it's absolutely fascinating you do.
And I think here we have an example of it in Italy, of a Canon point and shoot, except it oftentimes that you do so many things and it seems like you're everywhere, and I think we get confirmation of that with 8 different Phyllises in the image. And then finally, and this is where you started tonight, and I think it's where many people in the audience got to know you, especially during the pandemic on Instagram. Oh no, sorry, I
No,
forgot.
this is, but I don't know where
Polaroid.
it's obviously in a bathroom in some hotel somewhere. And I'm wearing silver glasses, so that earlier I had dark glasses on.
Yeah.
And that's a Polaroid.
That's a
isn't it?
Polaroid. Yep.
Yes, and so I didn't take Polaroid very seriously at all. I mean, I kept on thinking of Fritz Tugendhat, who, when guests, this is Mises, of course, great house, the Tugendhat house, and Fritz was the husband of the Tugendhat woman, and he would take photographs, and then when the guests left, he would give them a print of their presents at that dinner. And of course, his secret was having a dark room downstairs and somebody who was producing those. But this would be in the, 30s, 40s.
Yeah, thank you. And that then brings us to more recent times, as I started to introduce and to
You
your
can't see
iPhone
the camera
photographs.
here, can you? Not
You
very
can
well.
A bit, with the plant, which seems appropriate. Good. Thank you very much, Phyllis. We're now, and I'll ask actually perhaps for a different image, because Brigitte Shim is now going to join us. And I think we'll see Brigitte as well in just a moment.
That would be great.
Ah.
Yeah, there she is.
Oh, there
Hi,
she is. At the
Hello.
top.
Hello, Phyllis.
Hi, Bridget.
So greetings to everyone, to dearest Phyllis, to Juan, to my colleagues Peter and Brian, and to the Vital Daniels community. I can picture all of you in Principal Hall in one Spadina, and I know the room is buzzing with energy. I'm just returning from participating in a symposium in Tasmania, and I'm so sorry that I'm not there in person to join you. My question to Phyllis. Phyllis, you have always been preoccupied with making things, buildings, institutions, books. The making of these things is only possible with collaborations with so many others. For all of us around the world, the global pandemic was a forced detachment and isolation to intimate spaces for long periods of time. So while most of us were walking around in a hazy fog, you've been posting the most remarkable Instagram images. The photo that I selected is page 39. It's called Light Reflecting, at Home, Montreal, Quebec, late winter of 2022. And that is the image on the right.
Of course,
I would
this
say
is,
for me,
sorry, go ahead.
can everyone see that image?
Well, it's interesting because this also talks about pairing, because the
Yes.
photograph on the right is a great friend of mine, Barbara Shlapatova, who's an artist from Prague. And we were at the hotel in New York when I took that, so it was a kind of a sympathetic relationship of color. But that is so
Yes.
mad and wild in that photograph, because you see a wonderful photograph of Lynn Cohen on the right there. And this is one room with glass doors and another room with glass doors. But the light is coming from the street, the windows, of course, going to the street. And it's, how this happens, I don't know, but it's extraordinary color that happened.
Yeah, I just thought it was such a wonderful pairing. And that's one of the most catalytic dimensions of the book, is this kind of sometimes accidental and other times deliberate pairing of the image on the left and the image on the right, when they could have been taken at very different times. But I feel like that for me, this kind of combination was so powerful. What for me was has been so interesting to see through Instagram is through your photos taken in your apartment. You made us aware of so many remarkable qualities of the place we live in, this low winter light as seen through your domestic spaces. I feel you've enabled us to be transported from Montreal to, in effect, a world of light, abstraction, and shadow. And so even though you've traveled all over the world, as we know from your book, in a way, I feel that the observations that you've had, literally from your own backyard, from your own house, taken over the last many months through COVID, have been so poignant. The kind of way that we kind of get to re-examine the places that we have spent so much time in, and that we actually are revisiting, in effect, through your own eyes. So I just wanted you to maybe talk about this time of this unplanned confinement that we've all been through, but how you've used that specifically to actually share with us such meaningful insights that you've had in a place that you've spent a lot of time in, but are constantly revisiting. And I think, I would say to Peter's question, maybe most of those photos might have been taken with your phone and not with a kind of fancy camera, but even more interesting that it's kind of a different way of recording where you are and what you're seeing.
Well, that I think is the fascinating thing. Well, I have my camera here down in my bag. Usually it's in my pocket. And so it's always with you because it's also phone, strangely enough. and so, you're sitting doing something, you look up and you say, oh my, that's very interesting. And then, of course, there are certain things I do constantly. There are photographs and looking north across the street to a tree in an empty lot and a very early building in Montreal, because I live in the old city. And so you take that over and over and over again in different times of day, different times of different climates. And so that becomes quite fascinating. Or there's a plant in the room I work in, near my, which I take over and over and over again. And then you start experimenting with the light that comes in. This house faces, well, Montreal is north is this way, and and my face, the north is actually, we call this north, but so the house is fantastic. You always see through to the west and to the east, and so the light is always coming. And so the way the light comes in from the west is just absolutely magic. Different times of year, and there's one photograph. Actually, next to that was a photograph I took with an underwater camera. I forgot to mention that in the book. I didn't take many with it, but.
Great. So in a way, this kind of sense of confinement, I would say the kind of, how has it reshaped the way you think about your own domestic space?
Well, I do it quite differently now. Sometimes I'm really trying to look at the whole room, and sometimes I'm just doing details of the light on the moldings and the crack between when the doors open, and you see the crack between the hinge and the next door. All these kind of abstractions are so fascinating. And so I think that you work differently at different times because you're a different person at different times.
I just really appreciate the way that through these very sort of intimate glimpses into a space that you've spent so much time in, you've kind of allowed us to enter other worlds. When I see the image on the right-hand side, I feel as if I've been transported, but I also know that I'm in Montreal at the same time, and this kind of amazing winter light that we have, and the way that you've been able to both capture it, but abstract it at the same time. So it maybe tells us that, we can travel all around the world, but we can learn so much from our own backyard.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's wonderful because you're always reinventing the view, the space, the concept.
So thank you so much for your book, Phyllis. It's such an inspiration, and I can't wait to see what you'll do next.
Well, it's so wonderful to hear you from that small island of Tasmania. Extraordinary. Thank you for being here.
Amazing place. So
I'm thrilled to see you.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
All right.
Okay, so,
I'm-
so next we have Brian
Hi.
Boigon, who will be.
Phyllis, I
Brian.
have a question for you. So the question I'm going to introduce to you, Phyllis, will follow my paraphrasing of Gertrude Stein in her lecture essay entitled Composition as Explanation. Now a word about observation before I begin. In quantum mechanics, an observer is anything that detects a quantum particle. An observer measures the properties of a quantum particle. Therefore, observation is synonymous with measurement. Those two things come hand in hand. And as you say, observation is a constant, and therefore for me, under the cover of your book of images, plays with braiding composition with explanation. I refer to the title of the 1926 essay by Gertrude Stein, Composition as Explanation, that she lectured on in 1926 at Yale. Here's the handle, and here's the spout, as Stein writes, quote, "There is singularly nothing that makes a difference in beginning and in the middle and in ending, except that each generation has something different at which they are looking. Nothing changes from generation to generation except the thing seen, and that makes composition. There's almost not at all an interval. Everything is the same except composition, as the composition is different and always going to be different. Everything is not the same. Everything is not the same as the time in which it was composed, and because of that, the compositions are all different. The composition is different, that is for certain. Composition plays a central role in the tenets of modernity, since we tried to explain abstraction on the behavior of geometry that had to explain itself beyond the figural composition of transcendence. And in your photographic diptychs, they turned the viewer or reader into compositions that turned us into subjects and them into objects that we then in turn observe and therefore measure. What do you think of the analogy with Gertrude Stein connecting composition to explanation, and as you do so well with your constant observations in your book?
Well, this is a wonderful quote. Gertrude Stein is so marvelous. But you had also another question at the beginning in terms of space.
Observation and measurement.
You had one about space. The physics of space.
Yes.
Yes, and so I put those two together in my head, and because what fascinated me in terms of observation is that the fact that, and I've thought of this for many years, that if you go to the beach and you pick up some sand and you look at it, and you can analyze it according to your own knowledge. This is what Gertrude Stein is saying, okay?
Right.
And so if you say that, okay, like maybe you do it by color. You see all the blue, beige, different colors. And then you start to look at it in terms of shapes. And so you see how the sand has been formed, because different colors take different shapes because they're different materials.
Yeah.
And then you start to think about what was the marble or the stone that it came from. And then if you can then move on from there, and you start to think of the chemical composition of the rocks. And then you get into the cosmic aspects of it. So that at each level, you are looking, you're the same person, but and anybody can do this at any different times. But there's always a kind of the very observation of the very essence of the element that you're looking at.
And do you see those as layers?
Pardon?
Layers?
Yeah, well, it's layers, but it's not. It's like these photographs. I mean, the same person is doing them, but they're from very different places.
Right.
And done, they're not worn down, but they are observation of different times. That, of course, is a huge aspect of photography.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We can have some lights on for the audience. That would be great. Wonderful.
Oh, great.
Now you can see everyone.
That's lovely.
Yeah. So now we would like to invite questions from the audience, and I think we have microphones. Okay, I see. I forgot to wear my glasses, so it's a bit of a blur. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you so much.
Yeah, if you could, sorry, so for those of you who's asking the questions, please identify yourself if it's okay, and also please speak slowly and loudly into the microphone so it's easier for Phyllis to hear the question. But if there's an issue, I'll also repeat the question.
I do want to say that I can never hear the question because there's a difference between the handheld. So I need an interpreter.
I will do my best.
Thank you.
So go ahead.
Hi, Phyllis and everyone. My name is Taylor. I'm a first-year master's student here at the Daniels faculty. And what interests me the most about your photographs is the different places and spaces and the environments that you've captured over time. And I think most importantly, as a student, I'd like to ask, what is the most valuable asset or wisdom you can pass on to an aspiring architectural photographer?
Oh, passion. Passion. The asking questions and the passion of looking, of asking questions and looking. I think that's, and doing it not to show to anybody. I never thought of showing these photographs at all. And yet, as I said, people were very kind and suggested it. And David was sort of wonderful at being able to make that happen. But I think that I think that when you do things for outside reasons, no matter what you're doing, whether it's an architect or a writer or in music or in business even, that unless you really do it because of the essence of the thing itself, it's not going to work out, okay? Because it has to come from within the project, within the idea, and not something that's flown in from the outside. And that's a huge problem in architecture. People who are imitating, the architecture of somebody else, like Mies. I mean, he did this wonderful building. He said, then everybody else didn't understand. They took the bits and pieces. And so I think that's I think that's my answer.
Great. Thank you, Taylor. Yeah. Thank you, Taylor, for the question. You heard it perfectly. All right. Next question. Okay. Carl, do you have your hands up?
Clara, if we can get the microphone just to the middle aisle.
What's happening?
Taro.
Thank you.
Taro.
My name is Taro. I'm a PhD student here. Thank you for sharing with us your wonderful photographs. I think some of the photographs I like the most are the kind of the ordinary, extraordinary through your lens. It's not what I expect from an architect, to be honest. I am really intrigued when you mentioned the photography or through the camera's lens. This is the way you train your observation practice. And then I'm curious about the significance between photography and perhaps drawing, which many architects use as their means of observation. And I'm also curious, how does the change of cameras or technologies has changed your practice of observing? Thank you.
I didn't get the first change.
So the first question is the relationship between photography and drawing.
Yes.
Maybe that one first. And
Okay.
Tara, was that as a landscape architecture PhD student, was that a swipe at architects where you say you were surprised? It's okay, you don't have to answer that. We'll talk about that later during your dissertation discussions.
You're in trouble. Well, I think drawing and photography, interesting question. Drawing takes longer. And so you're thinking about it in a very different way. You're trying to render, let's say you're looking at a scene with the trees and there's rocks, okay? So you're trying to get a sense of what that rock is. And so you have to think about that. So because of that, I think that when you're drawing, you are very close to the essence of what that thing is, what you're looking at. And in photography, it's, well, first of all, you maybe do it by looking not just at the thing, but at the adjacencies, the places around it, so that you make an environment with the images, a series of images, seriality. This is something I'm very interested in, and I think you saw some of the photographs where, you were walking up to Sunyan. I thought there were 2 rows of images, and walking up, and so you start to walk, and you get closer, and you see the perspective to the left of the building. Then you come up, and it's not a building, it's a temple without a roof. And you move on, and you see the sort of structure this way. Then you see it that way, and you're closer. So that you're getting a different kind of aspect of looking at it. But I think what's wonderful about drawings is that you're, well, both photography too, but most of our drawings, you're looking over the artist's shoulder, and that's a marvelous kind of, there's an intimacy in drawings. And I guess you couldn't have that intimacy in photographs if you're not a commercial photographer,
So the second question was, how has utilizing the different formats of cameras, or has the utilization of different formats of cameras altered the way you perceive and observe?
Well, not so much, really. And I learned more about the different cameras I used when David was working with them, cataloging the information, and also when I was to sort of work out, somebody's doing an exhibition with the photographs, and so we're cutting out, each image. And you start to see that different cameras have different ratios of height to width. I was quite amazed about that, really learned about that. And so I just think the big difference is, when I had the lens using a camera that you could change the lens on, I think that's sort of a beginner's kind of thing. And it's wonderful to look through and see these different points of view because perspectives. But I think that when you just use one lens, and it forces you to work in a very different way, and I like that much better. I actually made a film once. It was my father's 90th birthday, and I made a film called Father, a Family Portrait. And so I gathered photographs of 3 generations, and then I also took specific photographs of members of the immediate family, and I did a kind of marvelous bagat at the end. I don't know how I ever did it, but I did. And so, but the thing is that I like the image separate, that you look at the image and you move to the next one, rather than the flow that you get in film, film is much more narrative, of course. And I think that using stills is much more analytic.
Thanks, Tara, for the question. We have a hand over here. Can you get a microphone over there.
Well, good evening. My name is Federica Zambelletti, and I'm here helping out installing an exhibition actually downstairs on Antarctic Resolution, which will open next week. My question stems from a comment with which you started off the lecture, which was the fact that you're an Instagram junkie. So my question is, how and to what extent has Instagram informed your way of observing the world, and also maybe as an insight into how other people, the people you follow, observe the world?
That's a good question, and it sort of follows up on the last question that was asked, because about how different formats change your sense. In fact, I was thinking of in the book, not only the format, but also the medium itself, for example, color or black and white. And because I was thinking initially doing a book of starting with the black and white, and then color, and that's a little primitive, and then Instagram. But they're mixed up in the book, and that's much more interesting, because that's not the point. The instrument, I think that the Instagram is such an easy. You always have it next to you, and so it's also because it's more viewing, because you look up and you see something, rather than saying, "Oh, I'm going to go out and go to the beach and take some photographs there," or something. So there is that sense of intimacy, and you can capture things that you can't really do with the normal lens camera, and that is that in fact, sometimes it's annoying, because you take a photograph in the dark and you can see everything. And so there's one photograph in the book that I took, for example, with an Instagram 11. They get better rendering or precision as it goes along, and it was wonderful because it has a kind of darkness and lightness, and you can feel the dark. It's just a door and a hallway, another door, but it just you can feel it. It's night. But most of the time, with the Instagram 15 or whatever it is I have now, or 17, I don't know what the number is. But anyway, you can really not do that. I think there are sophisticated ways of learning to do it, somehow manipulating it. But so that that does really affect what you can do. Did you remember the film? Probably you weren't born when it was shown, but I might have been. Barry Lyndon.
The Kubrick film?
Kubrick.
Yep.
And it was an extraordinary film because it was shot. It was the first time you could see people playing cards with a candlelight. It was wonderful.
Thank you, Frederica, for the question. We have another one here.
Hi, Phyllis. My name is Petros. I feel we're having a discussion that is about lenses, very lens-based. I also feel that your sequence today and your talk is also about rocks. You say so many things about rocks. I feel this is a very contemporary concern. A lot of us here working in the schools are also fascinated with rocks in different ways. So I was wondering if you could say something about that. Your answer to Brian's question, you're talking about the ground and rocks. I think it is very contemporary. And
You're talking about rocks, stone, right?
Yes, rocks,
yes.
Stones,
yes,
ground.
Right. Well, as a child, as I said, I walked to school, and there were these long, 300-foot walls, long, just flat, like that with regular windows in them. These were convent buildings, and the stone was cut in different ways. And I really enjoyed that. That's why I went back to Montreal when I was living in Chicago to photograph the city, because I knew that was so. To me, it was very interesting even seeing how you finish the rocks, the stone, because in early times they used a bush hammer. So you'd have, let's say, 9 points, or then multiple of a square, of course. And so, or you could do much more finer, so you get textures that way. And then the way you can cut the rock, for example, it's very expensive to have to bush hammer everything, and then also you use a combing effect. But then later on they learned to use to cut the rock like this because it's limestone, okay, and then that gives it a sort of a rocky sense of stone, and that is very interesting in Montreal because the French, when they first came, if you're French, you go somewhere you find stone, okay? If you're 17th century, because brick is English, stone is very French. La Française. There's a wonderful book about that. But anyway, so that the different ways of cutting the stone gives you time, it gives you sense. You could also date buildings in this kind of way. So that is a kind of a historical part of it. And using stone, that was interesting because when I was going to do the CCA building, I had actually, I was a Messian, okay? Glass and steel. And I thought, ooh, I don't know what to do about this. So Peter Rose, who is a Montrealer and a marvelous architect, and he just came back from Yale at that point. So we both started talking. And Peter had been at Yale with postmodernists, and so they were starting to use different materials in different ways. And so, we talked a lot about how to use the finishes, what the color was, and these issues. There's a great deal of kind of technical aspects of stone, and of course, the early buildings, the structure is the stone. Otherwise, later it becomes a facing. Does that help at all?
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks, Petros. There's hand here, question? Here, Ellie, yeah. The microphone's coming to you.
So, my name's Alfred, and not that I want to deviate from the photographic theme here, but given that photography is an allegorical memory of lived experience mutually and the recording of things that we've all felt, I think, I'm wondering about how the CCA is dealing with the further deterioration of the Expo site.
The deterioration of?
The Expo 67 site. What is CCA doing about that in Montreal?
CCA is not, there's an organization in Montreal which is marvelous, and it's Heritage Montreal.
Yeah.
And that is the kind of issue that Heritage Montreal deals with. The CCA is much more of a think tank about problematics in architecture, observation in the gray areas, what is not looked at, but not necessarily local, but just, the collections go from the Renaissance to today, not in a consistent way necessarily, but so that there are pockets of this, and so these are and then what's happening today, and how in the past did it happen, how does we're looking forward, or how do people live in the city? But I do a lot of conservation work. I mean, I've done a lot of work with neighborhoods of that are not necessarily in stone at all, even contemporary or 60s and things like that, of low-income areas to be able to. People are always making, architects, unfortunately, get paid to do rich buildings. And the social fabric of the city is hugely important. And so we're concerned about that. But the problem of the deterioration of the expo site, in fact, that's something that's being addressed. It has been addressed, and I don't know where it's at right now.
Thank you.
I'm not sure that's a very satisfactory answer, but that's all I can say.
Yeah, thank you for the question, and obviously for the audience, I hope it's okay with Phyllis. If your questions does not necessarily have to be related to the book. It's an incredible opportunity to have Phyllis here in Toronto with us. So if you have other questions related to her work, feel free to also raise it. And I think there's a hand back there.
Sorry.
Hello. Sorry. My name's Hamid, and thank you for your talk. You mentioned that I believe that you worked in sculpture, so I'm just wondering what you see as the relationship between sculpture and architecture.
Observation. There is I don't want to go into that old saw, sculpture, architecture, that's not of interest at all, but I think that it really is the observation that in working with sculpture, you learn to have to analyze the shape, the form, the materiality of what you're working with. And you do that also in architecture. And there's also, for example, when I talked about Hagia Sophia, with this wonderful buttressing, that's sculpture, it's a huge sculpture. And then there's a photograph of Delphi, of the theater, and it's almost a circular scena, but the mountains around almost make a bowl. So, it's in contrast. So you get all these different ways of looking at form and in both. And of course, the very big difference is you live in buildings and you don't live in sculpture. And so actually, that's interesting because when Peter Eisenman was doing the Mahnmal, the monument to murdered Jews, in this vast site in the middle of Berlin, and he was working with, what is his name? The great architect of steel, who uses huge pieces of steel.
Richard Serra?
Yeah, perfectly. Thank you. And so he was working with Richard Serra. And then the client said, well, we need some more trees here and something. And Richard Serra said, no, I'm not working on this anymore. Nobody tells me what to do. So, there's a social, very political aspect to architecture, which in sculpture there's not. You're doing your thing without anybody telling you what the rules are. So I think that's a huge difference.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I think we have time to take one more question from the audience. Oh, there's one back there.
Hi, so for now, many of your images are still related to the physical site. So it's like observation of the physical city, like a place that actually exists in the world. So what do you think about the current trends of AI-generated image and also like all the image that floats on Pinterest of like maybe like Photoshop or compose artificial buildings in artificial landscape? Like, is there any value in looking at those images, or do you have any insight of how those images can provide like new insight into architecture?
Could you help me on that?
So the question, thank you for the question. The question is about the expansive rise of AI-generated images.
that are particularly related to architecture and design that is on the internet. So, and in relation to that, not only AI generated, but say Photoshopped images of buildings and designs that does not exist in physical matter. So it exists only as a digital image, and there's increasingly more and more of it. So the question is asking your opinion on, do they have values? What are the values?
Values of what?
Do these either AI generated or computerized images of architecture and design, do they have unique and new contributions to architectural discourse or knowledge?
Well, yes and no. Yes, certainly you can look at a building in many ways and you can see the values, and it's also very interesting in being able to tell your client what the building is going to be like. But no is that the understanding of how you put two bricks together doesn't exist. The idea, the knowledge of what a structure is and how a structure holds doesn't exist. And also, in computer AI, you're a prisoner of the programs that exist. You know, so you use one kind.
To the
There you go.
Never
There you go.
mind.
You're
Go
back
ahead,
on.
Phyllis.
It's on back again?
Yes, you're back on.
Okay, the question
now an
is
you're
what,
now
what
an AI.
AI, the contribution of
The question
AI.
is, what's the contribution of technology?
Yeah. Well, I think, I guess maybe you didn't hear what I was saying. What I was saying that yes or no, that you can visualize what the space is going to be like. But it's much better to have known a space that let's say it's a volume of this room. So if you have to do something that's, this kind of a space and a function, and you have known what it's like to be in a space like this, I think as an architect, that's very important. And you don't get that from AI. You can see how things connect. You're also a prisoner of the programs that exist. And so if you use one kind of a program, things come out looking, everybody's drawings come out looking the same. And on the screens it looks the same. It's much too much of that. And so I think that's a pity. And also you don't know how to put two bricks together. You don't know what the materiality is. You might have a sample of stone, or you might have a sample of bricks, but how do you build those bricks? How do you make those bricks? Why is it the way it is, this small thing you could just put down, and then, you don't know any of those things. Well, you can learn them in technical ways, but you have to be able to really be in the field to get some sense of this. And I think the abstraction is wonderful for copying, but I'm not a great fan of. I think that what you can get out of AI and out of film is a sense of social aspects, of communication between people. For example, at CCA, we've been doing quite a lot of films. We've done a series now on how living in the city. And the first one was on people who can't live in the streets with tents and things like that in Los Angeles and Berlin. And the second one was people who live in single spaces. They're single, just not a family. They're just single space. And what is the typology that's being developed within that? And the third one, which I don't think is not finished yet, is in relationship to the elderly. Okay, So these are the kind of, the functionality, this kind of functionality is very, very good. But the pictures that get drawn, I'm not sure that they help. I'm not sure of that.
Thank you.
What you do imaginative stuff is different.
What?
But, you know, building is building.
So many thanks to you, Phyllis, for sharing with us your work tonight, and thank you for everyone for your engaging questions and for the conversations. Before we conclude, I would like just to take a few minutes to remind everyone of the upcoming events of the faculty. For the faculty members in the space tomorrow in this room from 5:30 to 7:30 will be the Blackness in Architectural Pedagogy workshop, in which we will be discussing how do we embed significant meanings in community engagement and also lived experiences. And next week, we have 2 public events, and I would like to encourage all of you to please come back to join us. Next Tuesday, March 14th at 12:30 noon, not 12:30 night, 12:30 noon, here in the main hall, landscape architect, Professor Jeffrey Howell from the University of Washington will be delivering his talk called Civic Urbanism Without Borders, on examples of contemporary landscape architecture, and urban design practices, turning placemaking into vehicles for collaboration and social change. This talk is being held in collaboration with the Global Taiwan Studies Initiative at the Asian Institute here at U of T. And then on Thursday, March 16th, thank you, Federica, for the preview, at 6:30, please come back to join us. We will be holding a public talk and launch of our next exhibition called Resolutions of the Antarctic, and this will be held in our Architecture and Design Gallery just downstairs where you enter. Chief Curator and Architect Giulia Foscari will be joining us from Italy, and we will be presenting and discussing both the exhibition as well as the Antarctic Resolution Project, which was really formulated as a multi-year project about integrating architectural and design knowledge into the advocacy for scientific research in Antarctica, as well as for the protection of Antarctica for the betterment and essentially the survival of all of us going forward in the face of climate change. So we very much look forward to welcoming you to come back here to this very room for that discussion and to be able to showing you both the exhibitions of the project downstairs, as well as a preview, international preview of a film project that's related to that. So without much further, I would like to say thank you so much for joining us. We'd like to invite those of you who are still here to please join us for some refreshments right outside in the Student Commons. It's right to the door to my right. And also to just say, you know, it's wonderful to see so many peoples and bodies in this room, to be able to share the physical space, as Phyllis was saying, the importance of coming together and the importance of understanding materials and matter, including the human bodies in space. And as a final note, I just want to say, on behalf of the faculty, on behalf of the university, and on behalf of the City of Toronto, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Phyllis. It's been a great honor to be able to host you and listen to you, and we cannot wait to see you to come back to share with us your next book. Thank you very much.